And I see it as very, what's the word? Enlightened self-interest would be the technical phrase, but selfish would be blunter. You say giving back, I say enjoyment.
Yeah.
It didn't occur to me that this was doing good. It just occurred to me this would be a more fun way of doing what other schemes have not managed to do, which is to make something fun, make it interesting, make it enjoyable, think big, and realise that you don't have to have. It's a bit like that old fairy tale of stone soup, you know. The traveller says you can make the most delicious soup with just a stone. If only he had a carrot. A villager has a carrot. If only he had some potatoes. A villager adds potatoes. All he had was an idea and a stone. And that's all I've had. So with several things over the years, because you don't need all the ingredients.
Hi, and welcome to the There's Another Way podcast with me, Adam Halverson.
And me, Pete Dolby. And you've come to the place where each episode we'll be shining a light on authentic people who have chosen an alternative path to their new normal to find another way.
Hi there, I hope your day's going well so far. On today's episode, we are thrilled to be joined by the one and only Oli Barrett MBE, a man whose talents know no bounds. Renowned for his charisma, generosity, and unmatched ability to connect people, Oli spends his time hosting world-class events for business leaders and igniting meaningful ideas with a focus on social good. He was once dubbed the most connected man in Britain by Wired UK. Oli takes us on a journey through his career from a transformative stint at Walt Disney World to how his time as a Butlins Red Coat kick-started his journey to becoming a world-class presenter. We'll hear how an incredible story of how a cheeky phone call to the founder of a high street giant led to a life-changing opportunity, and how his work on a project recognised by the late Queen inspired a new generation of young entrepreneurs across the UK. This episode is a real roller coaster of laughter, tears, reflection and inspiration. Oli's genuine warmth, humour and incredible stories make him a true national treasure in my eyes, and we can't wait for you to hear this conversation. There's another way. We are absolutely thrilled to welcome genuinely one of my favourite people on the planet here today. Someone I've been lucky enough to call a friend for, and it pains my heart to say, but nearly 28 years. I can't believe I'm saying that, which is ridiculous. He's a connector, he's a presenter, a serial entrepreneur. You didn't want me to add that bit in, but I did. A co-creator, the host with the absolute most. I feel like Alan Partridge now. Mr. Oli Barrett, or Oli B for short. Oli.
Aha. Thank you, Pete. And hello, Adam. Thank you very much for having me.
Here.
How wonderful to be here.
Well, I mean, just an absolute thrill. And welcome to the There's Another Way podcast. I know we've talked about this for a little bit of time, so we're delighted that you were able to come down to a leafy Buckinghamshire through the countryside to be with us today.
It's beautiful. We're close to the land of Roald Dahl. I feel like the big friendly podcast. Here we are.
I will say, honestly, as well, when we started this, your name, I think, was mentioned top of the list. Oh, we've got to get...
On the band list,
We've got to get Oli on. We did say that straight away.
We did.
So thanks so much for coming.
Well, you're smashing it. It's a great podcast. A massive variety. No pressure.
Yeah.
Peter and I have known each other for decades. Yeah. So he does know where the skeletons are. Halloween is nearly here. Anything could happen.
Twice in 2 weeks, Oli.
That is exactly right. Yes. Well, we'll get on to why that has happened.
Well, we will. So, as you know, with our podcast, typically we like to have a little sneaky look back at young Oli B growing up. Oh. And I mean, obviously I've been fortunate enough to meet your lovely family. So I can only imagine you've lots of happy memories growing up. But how did that look for you growing up?
Well, it was very happy. I'm one of three. I'm the eldest of three siblings. Grew up in England, in Surrey, leafy Surrey, leafy place. Dad from Manchester, mum from Kent. Hugely happy childhood. Smaller eyebrows, but hopefully the spirit for adventures. Just the seeds were being sown. But grew up in the UK, and threw myself into obviously school initially. But you tell me, Pete, what would you like to go digging on in my childhood? Is there something you've got in?
Nothing in particular. I
I
know some of your many talents. So I'm wondering where they were nurtured, including tinkling the old ivories being one. And I worked with a guy. I remember sending around one of your words of wisdom to a local team at work, and he said, "I know that guy. I went to school with him." It's just such a small world.
Well, I tell you something. So my dad from Manchester, and when he was growing up in Manchester, he was in a band, and his name is Peter, and the band was called Pete and the Mohawks.
Was it?
Yes, there you go. We could get you a T-shirt, Pete. You could be an honorary member.
And maybe an LP, but it's not £45.
Exactly right. Well, the cost of living, isn't it? And they still have reunions to this day. They get the guitar out. Some of their old fans come around. Anyway, and the reason I mention it, apart from the fact it amuses me that it was Pete and the Mohawks, was that it sowed that musical seed.
Right.
And so we would have, it wasn't the Von Trapps, but we would have a sing-along at home. You know, it was a musical household, and my dad would play me, and this would be great if I'd gone on to be some sort of record producer, wouldn't it? But the thread will appear, I'm sure. But Dad would play songs all the time, so that idea of loving music was there. And of course, as you've hinted, I'd tinkle the ivories. The thing that probably makes me happier than anything else is a sing-along with dear friends. We've had many. And just helping bring people together to enjoy themselves. The other thread, of course, was that Dad's career involved hospitality.
Right.
And so him and Mum remain very hospitable. So for them, looking after people, welcoming them into the house for drinks, for dinner, whatever it happens to be, was absolutely core to my childhood. So that idea of helping people to feel relaxed and have a good time was sown really early on. It's something I sort of still have right in my heart.
And I've been fortunate enough to be present on many of those occasions where you take centre stage and jump on and entertain masses of people in a big room. It's absolutely joyful. So it's interesting that you so that was born out of the family interest in music. So it wasn't something that, did you learn at school as well, or was it all self-taught at home?
I had some piano lessons. Let's not forget Maureen Olive Trailer in in a house, not a trailer, but she was MOT, funnily enough. But she, there you go. I never thought of it like that. But she, but anyway, I got my initial license through her, but I only got to grade 1, and then I sort of stopped lessons. And what I noticed was, as soon as I quit lessons, my practice went through the roof, because I suddenly stared playing for love.
Sort of less structure and
Yeah, it wasn't love for Maureen, sadly. I wasn't pining, but I was I was playing just because I wanted to. And there's a common theme there with stopping formal stuff only to embrace it in other ways. So certainly, yes, I had lessons, but then I would play. And so actually I remember many, many, many nights running when I was a bit older at school being kicked out late at night of the music rooms because they had to lock them up. And there I would be on my own playing away, writing music. It became an absolute love.
Wow, that's amazing. And that shone through when I first met you as well, because, you know, you clearly, and ever since, passion for music in itself, but also creating as well. You've definitely got a creative streak in you, haven't you, I think?
Well, I you know, for me, absolutely. And it isn't taking it so literally as becoming an artist, but for me, business is creativity. It's putting ingredients together. It's putting things together. And so it is that sense of what can we do? So I mean, music remains a huge part of my life. I would love it to be a part of my future, if I'm completely honest. But that thread continued because, yes, I was playing music. I played in a band. I wrote songs at school. We'd play those songs. They're completely cringeworthy looking back, probably. And then I was doing drama-related stuff. So I was in the choir. Sang in Westminster Abbey, would you believe?
Wow.
On one particular jaunt. Not solo. No Aled Jones or anything. Walking, more walking on sunshine than walking in the air, sadly. But it was definitely an opportunity for me to then get more involved in productions.
Yeah.
So before I know it, I'm in musical theatre. I'm then directing. Funny enough, brief tangent, Pete and Adam. I was longed to be cast in Wind in the Willows.
Really?
Because it was a school play when I was when I was about 11, and and I didn't really care. Badger, rat, mole, didn't care. Washerwoman, toad, same role. I didn't get cast. I was absolutely gutted. And the headmaster came up to me and he said, Oliver, you obviously haven't been cast because I'd like you to help me produce the play. Well, what does that mean? Nobody knew. But I had to basically muck in and help him as a sort of 10 or 11-year-old, boy. And weirdly loved it. So whether it was the props or the band or whatever it happened to be. And again, another seed got sown of, yes, there's on stage and there's helping put the ingredients together.
Right.
And so I've sort of kept one foot on the boards to this day. And yet my real love is helping put the pieces together.
Interesting. So to set the scene at school.
Yes.
So were you in the sporty crowd, the drama crowd? What sort of how was school? Was it
Yes. Well, at the risk of sounding like a sort of odd butterfly, I was probably bobbing a little bit between them. In no sense, I was sort of not quite, certainly not Premier League.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the one below that? Two below that.
The Wycombe Wanderers of
The
school sports.
Wycombe Wanderers of school. And in as much as I had a brief stint in the A team not the A team. That's the career twist none of us saw coming. There you go. Howling mad Barrett, as I was known. So, bad attitude. If only, but there was no BA. I dropped out of uni. Spoiler alert. Okay. So basically, I'm in the A team for one match.
Yeah.
We lost 7-1. Okay, and then I got a tap on the shoulder, my second tap on the shoulder of the podcast, and it's a different teacher. Can you imagine it being the first? Scooby Doo. And the teacher said to me, "Bad luck, son," and it wasn't Pete. And would you like to join the B team? And I thought, well, yeah, that's been demotion. He said, as captain. So I became captain of the B team. There you go. And that really has been my motto. But just to finish the story, yes, sport, yes to drama and such. Academic career, much more variable, sadly, because to cut a very long story short, I won a scholarship to my secondary school. Which obviously it was an honour and thrilled my parents. Unfortunately, I didn't really end up applying myself to academia. I don't think anyone could argue that I did. And so
it was an academic scholarship.
Well, I think yes, it was.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But I think I didn't really take that on board fully. I didn't take that responsibility terribly seriously, which sounds irresponsible, really, looking back. And so glittering. Yes, yeah, back to the A team. There weren't quite as many A's as one would have hoped, really, turned out.
Okay, but it sounds like you were in an environment where there was sport, music, things going on. It was a conducive environment for this kind of thing.
I was unbelievably fortunate just to join two dots together. Number one, possibly being the oldest child, with parents that encouraged me, that believed in me. We got on, we continued to get on. And they just backed me and they said, go for it. Whatever you think, go for it. The second point is I was at a school that by its own measure wasn't hugely academic and was much more interested in embracing a whole variety of things.
Brilliant.
Which sort of gave me that permission to do other things and weave them all together, which was an absolute gift.
It's really interesting to hear that, Oli, because a common theme on this podcast is people who have perhaps gone down a particular route or a path where maybe they've been encouraged by their parents or they've kind of, encouraged them to or maybe said, like, this is probably the best route for you. Some people have said that their parents are very, very openly, suggested careers that might suit their personality. Some people have said, look, I think this is the right career for you. It's really interesting, that your parents have said, look, do whatever makes you happy. And you can see with the variety, and we'll get into in a little while, of your career and the things that you've done. It's incredible. So it is interesting for people to hear, I think, how different parents can be and how they encourage them. Because it's difficult as a parent. You must feel that now. You want to guide your children to a particular path.
Totally. And the things, I took, for example... from my dad, I would take, his motto and our family motto, which sounds a bit American, was, I can and I will. So there's something about determination in there. From my mum, it was a longer quotation from former US President Calvin Coolidge around nothing will take the place of persistence. And the idea that the world is full of talent, it's full of intelligence, and these things end up not actually counting for that much if you don't have persistence. So I think those lessons were going into my head and the family's heads, I suppose, at a really early age. So it's fun. So you sort of thought, and with that, there was no, you should do this, you must do this, and which is an absolute gift, I think.
It sounds like a really good balance. And we obviously have the luxury of having a lot of content around this kind of thing, but actually your parents thinking this, a while back, fair play to them, it sounds like they had their head switched on.
Yeah, I mean, they're just astonishingly good parents. And funny enough, you've reminded me, Adam, I once picked a book up off my dad's bookshelf, and it was 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, or Highly Successful People, Stephen Covey, right?
Yes.
And I just remember reading just a little bit of it, I never very good with sticking with books for that long. But I do remember in the opening chapters, just that tiny insight that he shares around choosing your reaction. Between something happening and you responding, there is that, very, very short pause, and you choose your reaction. So anyway, just in terms of where things get seeded, I felt that ability to decide, now, do I manage this with great success every day of the week? No. But recognising relatively young, because I'd nicked a book off my dad's shelf, whereas now I would have found a podcast, wouldn't I? Yeah. And just thinking, that's not something I've read in class. But that is very interesting and powerful to me.
It really is, and I've heard that a few times. It's the Eastern philosophy, I think, isn't it? Just they choose how you can't affect what people say to you, but you can choose how you react to it.
Yeah, well, indeed, for thousands of years, Viktor Frankl, of course, as well. So so I think those, if we're looking at those early seeds, definitely, I would pack all those.
When did you first read Man's Search for Meaning?
Yes, I was going to say, I remember very well. I think I was just in my Mr. Toad costume. Oh no, I can't believe I've misremembered that again.
No, but I mean, everybody should read that book.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Both halves of it as well. So because we talk about it a lot, and we were even talking about doing a podcast on it because it is that good. But if you had the privilege of picking that up early on, then because I think I didn't discover that until my late 20s, early 30s. I wish it's one of those. It was like a light bulb, that book.
Yeah, and there's there are other hacks into that where, and sounds terribly lazy, doesn't it? There's a book like 50 Success Classics, which is like a little buffet where you get a taste of 50 books with the relevant and best quotations, which then draw you onto other things. So I think stumbling across things like that, quite young, then sort of points you off to stuff, doesn't it? And I'm very aware that perhaps in Britain we roll around, or we certainly roll our eyes at such things. However, I've always found, and I've noticed, I don't know if you've seen, but 20 years ago, this would have been much more common in the airport bookshelves. I remember listening to Tony Robbins when I was a student and so on. Much more common now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was sort of for me a bit of a late burn on all of it. But I mean, I would say that whatever you call it, the self-help, I mean, I think I did come into it through primarily Tony Robbins, actually. But actually, there's some great stuff in there.
Yeah. But we can come back to whatever point you like, but I remember so clearly I stumbled across, this is, I am jumping forward quite a bit now, but a speaker agency website. It's called Speakers for Business and run by a guy called Brendan Barnes. And on this website were just little clips of the speakers he represented, including people like the late, great Sir Ken Robinson. Absolute legend, talking about the power of creativity in our schools and how schools, in his view, kill creativity. And I just remember it being like a window into another world, because it was like those books from those airport shelves had leapt into real life. And all of a sudden I just got this glimpse, and it was for me the perfect antidote at a time when I was really struggling with my studies.
Yeah, sure.
I just thought there's life out there.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. And so school was a mixture of kind of sport and you said a kind of musical production, musical kind of play as well, did you say? Yeah, so
yeah, certainly on the drama front, so being in stuff.
Yeah.
went into directing stuff.
Yeah.
And then if we roll forward, actually ending up producing stuff.
Yeah,
although I
yeah.
had that little foray earlier on. But yeah, it's certainly in the mix.
Brilliant. And then you came to the end of your school time, and then did you have any ideas as to where that might take you, or a plan, or did you, any initial thoughts on?
No, I think the initial thoughts were. I think I remember at one point, obviously, Dustman was top of the list because that was just got me very excited as a young boy. Architect, but and then I think that was because there was an A in the book that I was going through at the time. If I'm being completely honest, I told the headmaster on this scholarship interview that I wanted to be a barrister, which I think he found quite impressive. Which obviously was the idea.
Working your way down the list.
Yes, exactly. A, B, and C, and we'll leave it there for now. And on the barrister point, it was only because I'd seen John Cleese in A Fish Called Wanda, and maybe Jamie Lee Curtis as well. And so I thought that's a brilliant thing to do. And so I sort of held that in my head for a little bit until I realised that it would involve quite a lot of reading beyond the first chapter. So I ditched that idea a few years later, actually, but an embarrassing number of years later, I might add. And so the only thing in the careers library, with all of its pamphlets and its musty smell, the only leaflet that actually made my heart beat faster, and I know this will eye roll because this is what all kids seem to want to do, was the pamphlet that said broadcasting. And for some reason I was drawn, not as a performer at all, more just the variety it promised.
But just quickly to go back, because you said your parents were in hospitality, but it sounds like they had, a lot about them in terms of, performing arts and music and stuff like that. Do you think that is where this was sort of the seed was planted, or?
In terms of performing? To an extent, both, and especially my dad in business, very confident, dream of being as likable as my dad in business, articulate, likable, engaging, a very powerful figure in my life who I'll come back to, powerful to me, was my dad's best mate, Rossi, who had been a real showman and hugely successful in business. And so I think those sort of role models, seeing those role models around you at that age, also plants seeds, and you these become heroes.
It's really interesting because I heard from the age of about 13, kids struggle to take much more on from their parent. I'm sure they do, but they point at having a parental figure in your life that, like you say, a parent's best friend or whoever could be a figure of influence is actually really interesting, because I think they're more likely to take on board inspiration from other figures rather than your parents.
And that could be around the family.
Yeah.
I've tended to be of the view that, children are by and large smarter, brighter than adults. And the main rule is don't swear around them. But other than that, treat them as small grown-ups, because they are quicker than, we tend to treat kids like they're stupid. So I think if you are lucky enough on your journey to come across an adult or a teacher sometimes who treats you like a little adult in a knowing, fun way, that is an absolute blessing. So for me, it was an English teacher called Michael Parkinson who just got me, and we just got on at a time when we were being patronised and looked down on by, and that does sound a bit unfair, but we were being treated like kids. And of course, there are many times when as a 10-year-old you don't feel like a kid, actually.
But it's such a good point. We interviewed someone recently, and I forget who it was. It might have been one of the rowers that we interviewed, who basically got into rowing because of a really influential teacher, and it's had a massive impact on their career. And it's really interesting, actually, that how impactful they can be. And I've never really thought about that before, in terms of talking to them like an adult. I mean, that's such a good point as well, because it does resonate, and you think, actually, and people talk about leaving GCSE level and going to A levels, and we treated more like adults at that point, and people remember those days, I suppose.
And I think very often when we hear about inspirational teachers, our mind immediately goes to their flair in the classroom, and they were so good at teaching. And actually, very often that is not what we really remember. We remember, and it's the old cliche, we remember how they made us feel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think everybody can remember that one teacher who, showed a bit of belief, a little bit of actually, we get on. Like you said, really well said, it's about getting on with those teachers, and then typically they're the ones who, you remember and influence your life.
Yeah, exactly. So all of those things are in the mix, and having been allowed and able to experience, whether it was meeting people, broadcasting, I have to say with retrospect, it was arguably quite a sheltered life until that point. In other words, going and meeting people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, had not happened at that point. Right. I was very aware of that. I became very aware of that quite quickly.
And the next step in your post-school career, I would imagine, I think it would be in your first job, am I right in saying, post-school, or not?
Well, I actually took a year off, so we call it like a gap year, I suppose, after my A-levels. And so we'd done the A-levels in the summer, needed to make some money, so there I am going into pubs, bars, trying to make some money, wondering what the hell I'm going to do, because most people around me that had said, they were fortunate enough to be able to entertain a year off, or a year out, if you like, before uni. And by the way, I just sort of felt that uni was the thing you do. It hadn't really struck me, because I was very privileged, remained very privileged, that, the majority of people don't go to university to this day. And yet the vast majority of people at the college I was at did go. Yeah. So that then was on the cards. So now I'm taking a year. I'm working in bars and hotels. But frankly, I didn't have a clue how I was going to spend the rest of the year. But I did know that I was applying to universities, which I eventually did. Place booked at university, and that was Edinburgh University. That's on the cards. What am I going to do? And then my life did change, Pete, as you know, because I heard about an opportunity in Florida.
And how did that transpire?
It came because a very dear friend of my father's, of my dad's, Rossi, who I've mentioned before, was working for the Walt Disney Corporation, right. And he, in a different part of it, and he said, I can't get you this interview, definitely can't get you this job, but I can flag it to you. And it's the sort of thing more people should know about. It involves being an international, and followers of this podcast might have heard you tell this before, but it's called being an international cultural representative. It's at the Epcot Center, part of Walt Disney World, Florida, and you will spend either 6 or 12 months on a program with other people from all over the world. And all of a sudden, my life changed, because I thought, that sounds incredible.
Yeah. And so at this point, are you not necessarily loving university anyway?
No, I hadn't even gone. So this is Okay. So this is in the sort of late, September, October or something.
Got you.
Yeah,
okay.
And I'm putting in the application.
Yeah. Okay.
And then you went for the interview. Beyond excited, I suppose, when interviewing.
Yeah, nervous, excited, not knowing what to expect.
Yeah.
And to my absolute delight, a little flashback with these might not have often been compared, but a little bit with my scholarship interview or exams, it slightly dawned on me that they were a bit more interested in, these might not be healthy conclusions that I'm about to draw here, they're a bit more interested in who you are and how you think and how you behave than what you know.
Yeah.
And so the scholarship questions would more likely involve things like, why do you think flowers are yellow? Or what can we tell about Henry VIII from this passage? Or whatever it might be, right? Likewise at Disney, there were no, as far as I remember, Pete, there were no fact-based questions. It was more about, sit down, let's have a conversation, let's try and work out. And by the way, this is because you're very much going to be front of house, so how you come across, how you interact matters hugely. And as soon as I got that sense, I thought... and I was made to feel very comfortable. I like the energy in that room. Lots of people there for the interview days. I thought, this is exciting. I really want this to happen.
Yeah, and looking back, I mean, their recruitment policy was sensational, wasn't it? Because I think during that time that we were there, I would say 95% of the people that we interacted with were ideal fit for that role. There were a few exceptions, but generally the people that are out there were just for a perfect fit, weren't they?
And they call it, you're not a staff member, they call you a cast member, which initially your mind goes to, tap dancing around on a stage, but it does go back to that point of casting, which is their view that, you recruit for, attitude, mindset, behaviour in that sense. And I realise, by the way, in the world of work as we know it, people have very different skills, and you can't mix up communication skills with talent. You just can't. Many of the most talented people I know aren't natural communicators at all. However, for Disney, they needed you to be able to meet people you'd never met before and make a good first impression and connect. And that's what they cast for. So fast forward, you put a bunch of those people together, and it's going to be a very, very fun mix, to say the least.
Yeah, and the thoughts when you're flying out there and first impressions when you arrived?
Oh, just relief. Because, by the way, I didn't have a plan.
Yeah.
So if that hadn't come off, it would have been hugely demoralising, and I probably would have not had a great time in lots of other ways, really.
Were you feeling any pressure at this point to get a direction, or
I don't think so. I certainly wasn't under pressure to decide on a career path. I had quietly decided, and anyone around me would have also decided on my behalf, that going into a large corporate, which had been my father's career path, for example, was not going to be for me. I'd stumbled across a column, awful phrase, How I Made It, which is still going, in the Sunday Times. And through that column, every week would be, essentially an entrepreneur. So someone had, built up a business and telling their story. And I really latched onto that as a thought, as a column, the idea of doing it for yourself, self-made, whatever that means, So I think that had entered my mind at that point.
So it wasn't necessarily an aversion from business. It was just big corporate, as in, already you were building that independent view of how you wanted to do things.
Yes, because I'd had a taste of, whether it was through shows or a band or different clubs or societies, I'd had a taste of having ideas and making them happen, and being allowed to make them happen and not being told what to do. And I think that becomes quite addictive. And once you've had a sense of that, you don't want to turn towards a large organisation where you think you might be told what to do.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so the Disney experience. So we've had a few people on already that talked about it, and I've talked about it a lot in terms of how impactful it was for me, because it just. It's the building block for my life, I would say. How impactful do you think it was for you, Ollie? I know you were in there for 6 months. Yeah. Most people were there a lot of people there for a year, so it was even shorter amount of time that you're out there for. But so a bit of a whirlwind, I imagine. But I mean, it's difficult to sum up in a few words. But
totally. It was completely life-changing. Quite emotional to say it, because you've met some of my best friends in the world I met through it, including Pete. And it was life-changing for lots of reasons. And number one, this was a world-class organisation to this day when it comes to looking after people and hospitality and guest service excellence. And, having a playful spirit, laughing all day, every day in a way, and yet taking something seriously. If you didn't take it seriously, if you went off the rails, you'd be out. So without sounding sinister about it, you had that looming over you. It wasn't break all the rules, anything goes at all. You're working with some quite interesting frameworks, and yet the core was treat people nicely, look after them, show them an amazing experience that makes them want to come back. That changed my life as a belief, in how to do it. The people I met, purely in terms of friendship, the ability not to have to just to be yourself if you are someone who enjoys being outgoing. And I don't mean everyone was gregarious or outrageous, but not to feel hugely constrained, and that for me again was life-changing. And then the next life-changing aspect was every day you're meeting people you've never met before from all around the world. Yes, who are in a good mood typically. Well, you never know, walking around a theme park with a family, you can't guarantee it. You're meeting new people every single day, and just the amount of energy I got from that, I thought, oh my gosh, I can't imagine a life in which I wasn't always meeting new people.
Yeah.
So I think, that's just scratching the surface of how it changed my life.
Beautifully put as well. And what always amazed me was it's part of the kind of settling in program. They say this is what to expect. There's going to be a honeymoon period, and after maybe 4 to 6 weeks, that you'll have a bit of downtime because you realise you're away from home, and you might have a tough spell, and then it'll pick back up again. And for an entire year, I don't think that ever hit me. It hit me when I got home, but I don't think there's ever a spell where I was thinking twice about what I was doing there. It was
we're 27 years on. I think it's still going on really for me. It does go. I was gutted when I came home. I was in mourning.
I was. That was the hardest thing I've ever done. Coming back.
I used to call up the podium just to hear the noise in the background.
I think it's amazing as someone who wasn't involved in that experience. It's so amazing to hear everybody who I've met through, obviously Pete, but talk about it, how a relatively short period of someone's life, an experience that, let's say 6 months or a year, has been that transformative. I think it's fascinating. And obviously I've sort of built up a picture in my head of what it must be like, but it just goes to show how an experience like that can be so impactful. I mean, it's and especially when we're thinking about our own kids. It's unbelievable.
And as you're saying that, Adam, I'm just imagining you in a set of, Dickensian +4s. And, I think it could have worked, actually. I think that first interview would have been very good, actually. And let's not forget the intensity. So you are working together, long hours sometimes, and you're also living together. Which might sound like some people's idea of hell, but I mean, can you imagine from 11 countries around the world, people flying in? So you've got 1,500 international cast members, around a big, a beautiful condominium with, is that the right word? With, a gym and a pool and extraordinary scenes, and then, for good measure, another 1,500 American college students. Anyway, let's not get carried away. Well, we might have done. But, so the formula in terms of the high touch experience that would have got you sacked, actually. It was a formula for intense experiences and relationships.
Yeah, it's amazing, and I mean, I love. We've said this a few times. I love the Disney experience. Yeah. It's obviously not for everybody, and it actually baffles me a little bit sometimes because, I think it's fantastic, but actually at that age, where you've got maybe some insecurity, some anxiety about who you are, to actually, like you said, be given a platform for that, be able to come out is amazing.
Totally, and I had certainly had those, especially throughout those teenage years. So to have that more emboldening experience, if you like, was incredibly, really, really powerful.
Yeah, it really was, and everyone arrived with a blank canvas, didn't they? No one knew. Well, there were a few people that had connections there, but generally you didn't know anyone in their background. Everyone was starting from scratch, and it was just an amazing melting pot of people from all over the country and all over the world, and just coming from the northeast of the UK and meeting people. I had a Japanese roommate, I had Canadian roommate, Norwegian, just these amazing people.
It was extraordinary, and I remember to this day, my godparents dropped me off at the Vista Way where we all lived, and on the coffee table was a large bowl of what I can only describe as prophylactics. And I thought, gosh, I hope that my godmother didn't spot them. And then my German roommate, Brian, sort of said, willkommen. I thought, right, crikey, here we go. Are these yours? And anyway, off we went. And then everyone had to leave. Not everyone had to leave. It wasn't a raid or anything.
Showtime.
And then an umpire band struck up. It was quite bizarre. But anyway, no, it wasn't that. Anyway, there was Wurst to come. So there was a very strange moment because they left and then all my housemates were out. Brian also left, as I recall. Anyway, and then I'm there on my own. I thought, okay, what's going to happen now? I just don't know. And then about 20 minutes later, there's a knock at the door. And this sprightly young man knocked on my door, introduced himself as Peter, and asked me if I'd like to come out with a couple of others for a Kirk. And I didn't know what he was talking about. Turns out he's from Hull. And it was a Coca-Cola. And again, life-changing moment. Pete Dolby on the doorstep. Would you like to come out for a Kirk? Yes, please. Very happy I said yes.
Oh dear, oh dear. The Fish Called Wanda went to Hull, didn't they, in the movie? Did I make that up?
Did they?
I don't know. Maybe that's a different one. I don't remember. Anyway, I digress. Yes, I mean, and I think just to explain that moment, I think I was paying it forward because I knew Lisa out there, and she'd arranged for people to meet and greet me when I got there. They were so friendly and welcoming. And we obviously knew that there were a few people arriving, so we kind of went around and collected all the newbies, and that kickstarted the adventure, didn't it? So
yeah, I just think it's another good behaviour, isn't it? Like when you spot someone, it's weird that, isn't it? Even to this day, I'm always thinking when I'm hosting events, who is the person looking like they need, just a quiet welcome, that look of uncertainty, that and that could be in a college or a school or a business environment. It's just having those eyes across a room, isn't it? Just to say, how can that short moment make someone feel that they're welcome somewhere?
No, I think that's a fantastic quality, and I think that experience almost reboots you from rebooted me somehow, and just I think ever since that point, just wanting to exceed expectation. Even, obviously pointing in some cultures is rude, so they encourage you to point with two fingers or multiple. So you're not.
You did it a bit like a gun there, Pete. That was a bit like a gangster.
Well, there's a few drive-bys around there.
Do you know, once I was driving through. Sorry, brief tangent. Adam thinks we've gone down a Disney rabbit hole. This is
why not?
Adam's about to start waving his fingers,
It sounds like a Disney nightmare with a drive-by.
Can I just say exactly? Do you remember that? Like Willy Wonka, wasn't it? Was that a Disney show? I think it was funded by a big cereal brand, actually. Willy Wonka back in the day. Anyway, that's a separate one. I remember driving through downtown Orlando, and my mum, who was visiting at the time, felt a little nervous, and she said, "Oliver, I think we've driven into the grotto." Anyway, sorry, we digress. Right.
Surrey meets Orlando.
Exactly. Surrey seems to be the hardest word. It certainly was that day. And I should explain. My badge said Oli from Surrey, and it did seem to be the hardest word because they couldn't say Surrey either, and they couldn't say Oli either, by the way. So they had to say Oli. So I just called myself Ali for 6 months.
Amazing. No, I was just, but that's still instilled with me today. So someone asks for my directions, I don't just point. I walk with them and take, because you're encouraged, and that just stays with you. And I don't know how within a few weeks and months that they instill those behaviours in you, but I still use a lot of the qualities, a lot of the ethos or whatever it might be from those days in my day-to-day life today, and it's never left me.
Yeah, absolutely the same, because of course we went through our guest service excellence training, didn't we? That ability to look after people, to understand who in any group the lead buyer is. In other words, who's going to be writing the paying for the bill. Not always obvious, actually. Who's your hidden sales assistant within that group? Someone that you can sort of sell to, cross-reference to the lead buyer, get a nod, all of a sudden you're having starters. Well, that might sound like something for a waiter or a waitress to learn. Actually, it applies just as much in business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where's the real decision-making happening? Who do I also need to unlock to make this happen? How do I make everyone feel comfortable?
Yeah. Absolutely incredible. And I know we've talked about the Disney experience, and we could do an entire series on it, but I mean, last weekend we were together with 16 of our dear friends that we met out there 27 years ago. I mean,
that's right.
It's still getting strong.
Stronger than ever. That group is a band of brothers, and actually when we all get together en masse, it is still just wonderful.
Yeah. Fantastic. So post Disney, then obviously, like you hinted at earlier on, I mean, it's a bit of a challenge coming back. I mean, it really was. I mean, that was a real low point for me, because you're on a high, you're in the sun, you're exploring America, you've got everything that you ever want to do, you know, as on tap, amazing restaurants, amazing beaches, and then you come back to the UK in February, pitch black, you know, winter, grim, miserable. It's hard. So how
100%. And also, I'd been hiding a bit of a secret which was going to catch up on me quite soon, because the truth was, and going back through having won this scholarship and then being able to cruise through a few things, I had never been any good at really knuckling down all on my own and working. And, for example, grinding out an essay. And I'd never been able to do it. So I'd sort of bungled my way through at that point, my A-levels, and then I'd had this incredible life-changing experience, and then I'm off to Edinburgh University, which is obviously up in the capital of Scotland, all 4-year degrees, and I'm studying French and Spanish. Now, again, back to the chapter 1 issue, I'm not sure I fully read the brochure, so I wasn't quite sure what the course involved until I got there. It turned out it didn't involve really learning to speak French or Spanish, and they were going to save that till the 3rd year when you went away to France or Spain. And to cut a very long story short, I realised very early on in that course, although I loved Edinburgh, I met amazing people, I threw myself into, whether it was the, not the footlights, but the equivalent, or
Beautiful place.
music and plays and radio and so on. But it crept up on me, I am not going to be able to do this degree.
How long did it take you to work that out, would you say?
I'd say about
10 minutes.
No, I know. I think about 15 minutes of the first lecture. No, it did. I started feeling a bit sick about it. I was like, this is never going to happen. Not for 4 years. I felt the same in the seminars. And I thought there's been an avoidance happening and I've got away with it. But the idea that I'm going to get through 4 years and come out with a degree is not going to happen. The writing was on the wall and I knew I had to drop out.
Amazing. I mean, it's a big eye opener, that. But I think just to touch on something you said, everybody I think has that moment where all of a sudden they realise things are getting serious, or I've got to, I remember it distinctly. It was my 21st birthday. I was in my parents' spare bedroom, I'll be honest with you, with a girl. And I realised I was
about to get very serious.
I was going to say, they weren't there.
Yeah, but I just, for some reason, I just remember looking out the window being like, because it was sort of like the night was ending, and it was like, I'm not a kid anymore. Like I've got to get down to, I've got to figure some stuff out. And like I said, all that stuff you're avoiding.
Yeah.
On that, some of those realizations, you're like, no, they're coming. They're going to catch up with me now.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And no Brian the German to help you either.
And so you would have been starting uni. What age would you have been here? You would have been.
Oh gosh, about I guess 18, 19.
Okay, so obviously a lot of time to work things out, but you're obviously already, you get to uni and you're realizing what was it? Just the difficulty of it, the nature of the subject.
I think without sounding terribly lazy, I think it was the work. So actually the physical experience, and by the way, having felt like $1 million and not had a bad day at Disney in 6 months sort of territory, and enjoying work, to find a lecture unbelievably boring. I thought
so. It was more of just a constraint. It was almost like I just shouldn't be here.
Yeah, and I remember saying to my peers at the time when I pointed out that I wasn't going to be carrying on, I was going to be dropping out at Christmas. They said, "Why?" I said, "Well, I'm just not enjoying the course." And several of them would say, "Well, no, neither are we."
It's what you're not supposed to.
It's just part of the course, isn't it? But for me, I just knew maybe it was the 4-year thing, but frankly, maybe I could have done a year or something, But that's why the writing was on the wall, because I thought 4 years, this is not going to happen. So I felt it. I found the lectures now, and sorry to be disrespectful to those lecturers, but I found them not interesting enough for me, and also, let's be honest, the idea of going into a room and grinding out that essay or that piece of work was also not possible for me.
And so when that realisation dawned, you left at Christmas. Did you have a plan B at that point? And how supportive were your parents when you made that decision? Hugely
supportive. This is a bit disappointing really, but I was the first in the family as far as I know, to go to university. So also the first to drop out, so I think that was a bit unexpected. And so probably a bit surprising. But
and a proper uni, Edinburgh's.
That's right.
Proper place.
Yeah, absolutely. And but again, because we've always got on, we've always been able to communicate clearly with each other and openly. I think they trusted me. They trusted my judgment. To be perfectly honest, I wasn't hugely distraught or gutted about it. I was mildly excited, if I'm honest, because I knew how right it was. I knew how right it was to leave.
Felt that the right decision.
It did. If I'm honest, it feels. I haven't really thought
but it's
about
great
that.
because a lot of people don't. Because for whatever reason, it's quite a brave decision. Almost because a lot of people can feel it as a failure, right?
Well, yeah, and my tutor said that at the time. He said, well, almost, kudos to you for challenging the status quo. But to be honest, it never even crossed my mind that I was making the wrong decision. Not even for a second.
Good for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then what came next then? Once you'd left university at Christmas, what was next on the?
Well, I thought as I leafed through this huge book of every course, I thought, come on, there must be a way that I can jump onto a course in January. And it turns out that wasn't really going to be possible. But also that there weren't, it sounds very uninterested in the world, but there weren't a huge number of courses that I was very interested in. But that word came back to me from the, stuffy careers room, broadcasting. And, broadcasting courses, even then, 4 years ago, were 2 a penny. And this was a broadcasting course at the University of Leeds with a twist. And the twist was it was taught by the BBC. And so it was a very practical course. You effectively got some BBC accreditations through the course. And it was notoriously hard to get onto, and it was notoriously the best in the country. I thought, that is the course. And even as I limbered up to try and apply for it, I realised I wouldn't be able to do it till the next September. So spoiler alert, I did get onto that course, but then I had another space to fill. And then I was, very oddly, what happened was, I have had this a few times in my life, I was imagining my life in reverse. So I was imagining being an old man and thinking, this is a bit boring. So I know that sounds ludicrous, but I felt, you've dropped out, don't do something boring. And what happened next, I'm not going to suggest is wildly exciting, but it did occur to me to become a Butlins Red Coat. Without sounding deeply unserious, that entertained me as a thought, and it still does, obviously. And it again was amusing and amazing for very different reasons. And he's cropped up 3 times now, but Malcolm Ross, had been a Butlins Red Coat. And I think he saw in me at that point, possibly before Disney, a little bit afterwards, someone who hadn't really met people from lots of different walks of life in the UK. And so I'd had that encouragement. Also, let's be honest, although I've never aspired to be a performer in that traditional sense, I was aware that there was this sort of slightly weird, and forgive me, our international listeners, Butlins is a holiday resort, a holiday camp, which is slightly famous for its entertainers, and they're called Red Coats, and they wear red coats, and they have been going for decades and decades. And anyway, I was aware of this legend, if you like, that some of the most famous people on our screens had started out as Butlins Red Coat. So I'm being very honest that I think that was part of it. I thought, I don't quite know what to do next. It does feel, let's also be brutally honest, a bit like Disney. I mean, back to Vauxhall. No offence, conference. But I think I was seeking out another taste of that entertainment meets holiday experience, and so I threw my top hat in the ring.
So just before we go back into that, so Malcolm Ross has come up 3 times.
Yes,
and we actually had a practice of a podcast the other day, a different format, about sort of there's another way for kids. But obviously a lot of that is about mentorship. And before, obviously, I'm conscious of time, I want to get into your story, but I'm just fascinated about this character because, you've met Toby, who's my equivalent. And with my kids, I'm looking for, I think we're all looking for those people for our kids.
Yeah.
But what sort of environment, because it sounds like he's been there at really pivotal moments, just like Toby has for me and other people as well, like my brother, but what sort of, how did it come about, like, and sort of why did he take it on as such a...
So we're very fortunate in is it about this country, is it about Church of England with godparents? So he had been a best mate of my dad's. They'd met at catering college. My dad's first impression of him was not good. They didn't hit it off, but they ended up becoming best friends, housemates over the years. And so from being a family friend to a godparent, and that godparent status, I think, gives someone permission. And we've thought about this a lot with our daughters, that permission to have that additional relationship. Almost like they join your personal board, really, don't they?
Yeah.
So that ability to see them doing their thing, to see them enjoying their life, but also to be pushing you, because they'd worked also in hospitality, but just encouraging you to explore other things. You know, he'd gone overseas, he'd worked in France, he'd worked in the US, and just seeing other ways that were possible as well.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Sounds like an amazing influence on your life. So how did the Butlins experience compare to Disney? Completely different.
Totally different.
Yeah,
totally different. So I arrived in my little Ronnie Renault
Yeah.
at the front gate on day one, and I remember saying, my boss, I was told to report to a chap called Johnny Diesel.
What a name that is.
Which actually turns out isn't his real name. I believe isn't his real name, but it was named after his favoured drink at the time. Don't ask me what Diesel was. I think it might have blackcurrant in it. Anyway, and so I remember getting to the barrier, and these burly security guards looked in at my little Renault and looked at me, and they said, whatever they said, and I said, I'm here. I said, oh, hello, I'm here to see Johnny Diesel, please. And they looked back at me as if I was some sort of, Lord Fauntleroy or something. And I wasn't aware of how I'd said it. They said, we're here to see Johnny Diesel, please, my lord. I was like, wow, we're not in Kansas or Florida anymore. This is going to be very interesting. So in we go. I go find my chalet. I say chalet. There was nothing Swiss. Heidi was not in. Neither Heidi nor Brian were in that day. But interestingly, Wayne and Shane were. My new housemates, literally called Wayne and Shane. Both Red Coat entertainers. And I settle in. And I had been cast, if you will, as a Red Coat, and I certainly haven't spoken about this on a podcast before, as a kids entertainer. And I'd filled the shoes, the very big shoes, I think we can all agree, of H from Steps, who had just left.
Really?
What might have been.
You're really working your way through that alphabet, aren't you?
Well, it was a step down in some ways, but a step up in so many others. So off we go. So I was in these what were called the whiz kids, and that meant a lot of singing and dancing and all that sort of stuff. And anyway, long story short, off I threw myself into that, and then I did get a third tap on the shoulder of the podcast, which was neither of my teachers, but the head of entertainment at the time, and they said, "We've got an opening for you. We'd like you to do some MCing." Comparing on the main stage in the main venue, which is Broadway, 2,500 seater show bar every night. And so I changed role, but there I was doing that and other comparing, hosting things.
Wow, that's a really important part in your career then, because obviously you've taken on that since, and well, we'll get into it, but lots of different events.
Yeah, and surrounded then by complete legends. For me, there was a brilliant pair, CJ and Sean, who were like the Ant and Dec really of that particular resort. I was just sort of idolising their ability as on stage, and so these characters were the real deal. And I got up and joined that MCing lineup, and I was rubbish. I mean, I really was, and I'm not being modest there. I was. When I say I was rubbish, I was just throwing everything at it. I couldn't see anything, partly because I didn't have my glasses on some of the time, but also because of the bright lights. So it's totally dark. You're shouting out, probably with hindsight. I think I'd adopted a northern accent at this point. Anything.
But you've had some experience to cope.
Anything not to go, yeah. Exactly. Exactly. The Hull Express was in town. So I sort of adopted this persona on stage. And anyway, it was my first experience. It wasn't polished. It wasn't any good looking back. It wasn't engaging, really. It's very strange I carried on doing it, really, because I don't actually think I enjoyed it all that much. I really didn't enjoy it all that much, the comparing bit, but I continued to enjoy the interactive, the full sweep of what it involved.
Yeah.
That idea of having not being recognised per se, but having a red coat on enabled you to be trusted and build relationships really quickly. So it gave you a head start, it gave you an advantage. And so I took a huge amount, and it was a summer season, right? It didn't go on forever, and then but again, definitely a proper, a formative chapter.
It sounds like it's building blocks for building who you are today, and each step you've taken something out from so far. But it sounds like it was impactful time there,
and no question, an insight into a more diverse group of clientele, right? It's not Surrey, like, you know what I mean? It's, again, without without making any stereotypes or assumptions, I've been to Butlins. I thought it was actually flipping great, actually. But it was more expensive than I expected. But because we chose to do it over Centre Parks, thinking, we're a bit tight this month, so we'll do Butlins. And I was like, no, it just ended up being probably more expensive. But it's a diverse crowd.
Totally, and having been back on a holiday, and I absolutely loved it, and I did love it at the time. But it just struck me there, and this does sound it does sound a bit cheesy, but I realised then to this day love meeting people, and I don't care whether it's Maureen at number 62 or the Prince or whoever it might be. It just doesn't matter to me, and obviously, punchline, you have much more intriguing conversations with Maureen than you probably ever would with the Prince anyway. And so it was that mix that I thought, whatever I do, please can it continue to involve meeting people from all walks of life, from all different backgrounds, and preferably all parts of the world. The other thing Butlins definitely gave me was that sense of playfulness and mischief to shake things up a little bit. So if we fast forwarded into business, for example, I thought, let's shake up a networking event. Let's do not speed dating, but speed networking, where we'll blow a whistle. You'll have 3-minute conversations. Ended up doing it. I've done it in 15 or 20 countries now. But if I hadn't done Butlins, I definitely wouldn't have done speed networking.
Interesting.
Amazing.
And so it sounds like it was a fantastic experience doing that. Then you were going to Leeds University for the broadcasting. How was the transition from life as a red coat into knuckling down to...
Well, it felt very natural at the time. Leeds, another great city, very practical course. I thought, this is more my cup of tea. You're actually doing stuff, you're making radio. I had my own radio show.
And so when you say more your cup of tea, actually you were glad to be sort of out of the spotlight, you mean?
And much more...
Compared to the previous...
Compared to the Edinburgh situation, whereas we're in a smaller group, it's a smaller course, you're having a conversation in a TV studio with people who have actually worked in business, and you're making stuff as part of your work. And I had a radio show for fun on the side where it was a spoken word show with some friends, and we'd do that every day that the student radio was on. And so again, a bit like giving up piano lessons, that wasn't part of the course, but I was throwing myself into that. I was getting up early to research the papers or plan that day's show, and it's just if you force me to do something, I probably won't do it. But if you give me a free rein, I'll throw myself into it.
I was going to say, it sounds like the issue you'd had before of not being able to sort of dig down on it, that seems to have gone at Leeds. That changed.
Yeah, I'll be honest. The essay bit didn't. So being able to, and maybe it will haunt me forever, but that really didn't. And so there was a looming situation. I actually went to some counselling because I thought I'm really struggling to write these essays. And so I think it was a condition of being allowed to stay on the course at one point, that I go and see somebody for a little bit of help to talk through these challenges. And I remember them saying, have you thought about dictating your essays or something? I thought, well, no, I don't think that would have worked either, if I'm honest. So that remained a bit of a challenge, if I'm honest. But what was bubbling up was... because it was so connected with the real world, calling the real world university as part of the real world, but real TV companies, real radio companies. And so I was applying for bits of work experience and internships, and went off for an internship in New York for a kids' entertainment company. H wasn't there. That's a bit of a disappointment, but there you go.
He just left.
Yeah, and I worked on what was then the launch of Bob the Builder. Remember Bob the Builder?
Yeah,
Can we fix it? Well, he certainly fixed it for me for a few weeks. And so I had this variety of real work experiences. And then you can probably guess what happened. The more I got into these work experiences and my radio show, the less I really wanted to be studying, which is terrible, isn't it? This is a terrible advert for kids listening.
It's not, though, because what I find fascinating is, like we hinted at earlier on, there's lots of people that kind of go to university because they feel it's the right thing to do. There's pressure to do so. Well, you need to study A-levels at 18, then you need to go to university after that. But there's so many different ways to do it. You don't have to do it that way. And you've clearly realised that you see the elements of what you're learning at university as really lighting you up. But the actual knuckling down the studying bit, the academia side of it.
And especially throwing it all up in the air and saying, you can earn while you learn now
Yeah.
with degree apprenticeships. You can do shorter courses. You can do much more practical, hands-on courses. Get as close as you possibly can. It's a bit like why reading autobiographies is so powerful, because you get really close to someone's life. Find out what's really, really involved, and then see that there's a huge variety. And it isn't for everyone. On the flip side, I met some of my best friends in the world at uni. It enabled me to do stuff like the student radio, to discover some of my main passions, back into producing shows, which led to meeting my first ever business partner.
Right. Which was...
So that was a company. Well, started off producing a show, Jesus Christ Superstar. At the end of the show, the person who directed it, I'd produced it, said we should continue doing stuff together. And we started brainstorming things that we'd like to shake up around the uni and around the world, which led to the seed of the very first company. And the very first company, and I'll just put it in a nutshell for today, was we felt the careers fair as was quite boring. It was quite grey, and weirdly, it was only big companies. And so we thought, what about a careers fair run by students for small, interesting companies, but also where students could meet each other if they wanted to start stuff. So a bit like a venture centre.
Yeah.
And we said, very modestly, we'll call it Amazing You. So that idea that it's not grey, it's about, students being amazing, having amazing ideas. And we just said, let's go for it. So we started our first company, and we did. And thanks to Erin, my co-founder, we thought big, hugely ambitious. And again, that audacity, if you like, because we were so naive, led to some pretty punchy phone calls. One of which, for example, was to Saatchi & Saatchi, the world's best-known ad agency, who gave us a break. Before we know it, we're meeting their biggest clients. We're raising some money into the business. We're on a roadshow now, around 9 cities around the UK. We've sort of employed 150 people. And by the way, I'm still studying. I'm still studying. I'm fairly sure I've got that timeline right. I haven't dropped out at this point. Another spoiler alert. I drop out again. It's not going well, is it?
Well, it sounds like it's going very well, but not...
Well, no. Punchline. The business didn't go well either.
Oh, right.
No. Well, it flew, didn't it? It looked great. People slapping me on the back. Millionaire. Unbelievable. No, of course not. We delivered what we thought were some exceptional events. I think we looked after people. People got paid. We really didn't know how many beans made five, if I'm honest. We were quite naive. We should have listened much more carefully to our smaller investors who were chartered accountants, for example. But I think, back to those Sunday Times columns, I think we were sort of a whiff of the Richard Branson. We thought this could be massive. One of our shareholders, who's phenomenally successful, said, amazing you universities today, amazing you hotels tomorrow. We're like, yes, let's go. Yeah. This is good. Pedal to the metal. Well, the car did not stay on the road, sadly. The last thing I saw of my office, full of books I'd got from the airport, the very office I'd seen that series of speakers in, the last I saw of it was one evening late at night. I thought, gosh, this is exciting. And that office was repossessed.
Was it?
Yeah. And we lost the whole company.
Oh God.
Yeah. So it was it was sort of a hit the brick wall quite hard.
And what did you? I mean, you must have learned. It must have been a great learning experience for you to go through that. An exciting time, but you must have taken so much out of that experience.
Huge amounts. I saw one of the first employees, now hugely successful in their own right, as so many of them are, because we were spotting what we thought were some of the most talented people in some of the most exciting universities in the country. So stayed in touch with some of those, stayed in touch with some of the investors, met my next business partner through that first company, took a vast amount from it. Weirdly, I have no appetite now to build up a team personally in a company. I'm much happier being free to move between multiple different things, multiple different organisations. At the time, it felt unbelievably exciting.
And so what age would you have been here?
I'd say 20, something like that. Forgive me if I've got that wrong, but that would have been 2001. Like that. So probably more like 22, something like that, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny, I heard a story on the radio this morning actually talking about, it's actually Walt Disney, and it was talking about how he started the theme park business into his 50s. and he'd obviously had much success with the animation studios and the film side of things. But when Walt Disney World opened, it was a catalogue of errors, catalogue of problems. So it was a 100-degree day, and all the pavements were melting, so people's shoes were getting stuck in the pavement. The food
which led to that famous Walk of Fame. Do you remember?
the food and beverages were running out left, right, and centre. The boats were breaking down. It was just a catalogue of problem after problem after problem. This is him talking about it on all of his books, and obviously sometimes going through those experiences, you can't get everything right from day one. And he obviously still going strongly today. It's one of the most recognised companies in the world. But he wanted to shake up the theme park industry because he found them all to be very boring. They were very kind of geared around promoting certain businesses like electrical companies and things like that. And obviously he shook it and turned it on its head. But there were some challenges to start with.
You don't hear about those, do you?
No,
definitely
exactly.
Get brushed over. I mean, with the benefit of hindsight, I probably should have taken more time at these different junctions to download and decompress and reflect. Because actually my habit of barreling on to the next thing. But then again, you could also argue, if we had more time, that actually, if you pause for too long, you lose your momentum, you lose your confidence.
So when this first company hit the brakes, did it feel like a failure? Did you?
It sadly hit more than the brakes, Adam. It hit the wall. Yeah.
Okay, so it hit the wall. How did you take it?
Oh, I was gutted. Yeah, I was really. I felt embarrassed. Felt really demoralised. Felt very stupid. I was gutting, especially because there are some ideas you never fall out of love with. So it wasn't like, smoothies were never that nice, were they? It wasn't that. It was like, no, the fundamental idea was so exciting. So you're definitely dusting yourself off. However, because we were in the business of gathering people around the country, I was really proud of what we had been doing, and I felt I could hold my head high and if anyone was looking and say we did some good stuff.
Yeah, and the reason I ask, I think it's such an important point that, again, I keep bringing it back to my own kids, but I can see it already how it creeps in with them at this age, which is 14 and 11, is the relationship with failure. I mean, even the word failure is a very loaded word. And obviously, we're going to cover the rest of your story and how it moves on from there. But, I think it's just, that for someone at 20 or 21, that's a massive thing to go through, because people are so failure adverse. They don't want to experience it. And obviously, it's great. You're proud of it, but it's a lot to go through at that age.
Yeah. Again, I just feel incredibly privileged that I had. There's a technique, isn't there? Like, imagine what the worst that can happen is. Get comfortable with that, and then.
I didn't know that was a technique. I do that all the time.
Yeah.
Honestly, I didn't realise it was a thing.
And then once you're at peace with that, so I suppose I remember thinking, well, I could go back and live with the folks and all that sort of scenario. And because I had that love and support, it didn't feel that I'd lost everything. And of course, I hadn't lost everything in that sense. Also, because I'd had glimpses of other business people's endeavours, you sort of, not to sound pessimistic, but you realise that is part of it, right? So many people have had that, but I think, and I'm a huge fan of Winston Churchill. Success is the ability to go from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm. That's true.
Yeah. Well, I think so many people would have probably given up at that first hurdle. They'd have probably done something else because like you say, it's going through those times and coming out the other side of it. And Richard Branson started numerous businesses that were unsuccessful initially, and until he found one that worked.
100%. And by the way, that idea of co-founding something, doing something with someone else, has been such a theme. I don't think I've ever really been I'm not. That's why I don't call myself an entrepreneur. I rely on teaming up with brilliant builders to help make stuff happen. And so for me, because I've always enjoyed working with other people, that's the only way I enjoy working. I enjoy my own company much more since lockdown, actually, but I hadn't traditionally ever enjoyed working on my own. It was only a case of meeting my next collaborators and next business partners that was the issue. So I think if I'd had any sense that the first thing was all on me, I'm not suggesting anyone else was to blame, but if I'd suggested this was more all about me, then it probably would have hit me harder. But I was able to separate it.
So what came next then after that? Must have been a very difficult time for you. How did you come out the other side of that, and what were you planning?
Well, I had written I'd read a brilliant book, which is still available, called The Little Book of Yo by Simon Woodroffe, who founded Yo Sushi. And in it are lots of examples of his chutzpah of just writing to people and just going for it. And I took a leaf out of his book and I called him. I thought, right, have some of your own medicine. And he had agreed to meet me and speak at one of our events in Sheffield. And I'd even cheekier, I said, thank you. And can I buy you a beer in London? And he said, yes. And he said, I'm going to bring someone along. This is the day before we met, who's closer to your age. And he brought a guy in for a beer called Ben Way. And Ben joins us for a beer. Simon ends up having to go for a dinner about 8:30, 9. Ben and I end up chatting until midnight, just talking about business and talking about ideas. And Ben becomes my next business partner.
Amazing. I think I said hello to him in your office in London. I came to see you one day. I think
that's right. Yeah. And fast forward then. And by the way, Ben was the first ever secret millionaire on that Channel 4 series, having been told as a school kid that he would never learn to read or write.
Wow.
Was one of the smartest guys I've ever met.
Was he involved in the $1 Million homepage? Or
no, so that was Alex Chu.
Okay, that's right.
Yeah. Ben very much sort of that sort of .com millionaire.
That's right.
Sort of generation, very much so. But we then teamed up, formed a business called the Rainmakers, which was a name we loved. Still going to this day, thriving. Now based in the US, but with shares in lots of different companies. And we knew that we wanted to do a variety of things. So having a vehicle through which to do a variety of things feels and then felt like a much happier scenario for me.
Right. And so chance meeting, so chance email to ask for some assistance. You met for a beer and then isn't it funny?
I actually called him up. I called Simon up at one of his Yo Sushis. I said, hi, is Simon there? It's Oli. He said, he's gone out for lunch. I said, can I have his mobile again? I've lost it. I might have said I lost it, but pretended I knew him.
Yeah. But we were talking about this the other day, so it's gonna come out on another podcast. But my brother's son is he's landed a job which at 18 he's selling eco solutions, walking door to door. But even at 18, he's picking up things like knocking on the door. Oh, you're here to sell me something, aren't you? He's like, yes, I am. Should I take my shoes off or can I leave them on? and just walking in. He said to one person, that smells nice. Can I come for dinner? He's like, yeah, come on in.
That's amazing.
It's amazing. And it's given me, in my 40s, a complete kick up the backside because I'm like, I've lost that, but it's here, kids hear you talking about, and we're glossing over them like they're kind of things everybody does. People don't write to the owner of Yo Sushi. They don't have a bit of this mindset is it's what this podcast is about.
Yeah, and it's behaviour as well, which, as I say, in a lovely twist, I picked up from the book itself, because he was writing to an airline and saying, would you like to sponsor my new sushi bar in Poland Street, London? And if I don't hear from you, I'll assume it's a yes. Because it's complete audacity, which I rather love.
But who doesn't like that? Who in business or in any walk of life doesn't? I like that guy. But the thing is, so many people are scared to do it or to step into that realm.
Yeah, and I continue to this day, and Pete knows this, but so many of the things I've helped to start or been involved in have started off with this crazy long shot, often an email to someone that I really think they're never going to get back to me, but I hope they will. And just realising that, actually the chances are they're not going to say yes or no. The chances are they'll just ignore you anyway, which you have to send it again and so on and so forth, right? But as you're saying, Adam, it's about a different mindset. It's about a different behaviour that just says, what's the worst that can happen? Go for it. Has anybody ever told me off for writing to them in 30 years, 25 years? Nope. Yeah, why would they? It's not an offensive thing to do.
It's just so frustrating. It seems so difficult to get this across to kids. Or me and Kat were walking the dog this morning, and we were having this exact conversation about school, about GCSEs, and so for example, I mean, I think I've had some health issues this year. So let's say I'm not around to impart my knowledge onto the kids. One of the things that would frustrate me so much is not being able to say to them, not being able to say to them, just don't worry, there's infinite paths. Like, and I think what I love about this conversation is that, you can hear it. This isn't your dad talking. This isn't, someone just making up these kind of like, oh, you've got to do GCSEs and you've got to do A-levels and you've got to go to Edinburgh. That's what this conversation is about.
Yeah, and there's no doubt in my mind that, what you have imparted to them will not leave them in that sense. And it is that reassurance. And it's also understanding, as you're saying, that they don't have to have it all worked out. I remember saying to my sister, Ellie, 7 years younger than I am, just think of it, and I know this might not be everyone's philosophy, but just think of a career as a series of adventures, a series of stepping stones. And if you can see a stepping stone ahead at a time, then that's exciting, but you do not have to see them all mapped out in front of you. And I remember her just almost sighing with relief at that idea, because we put so much pressure to decide. I remember, and I've done this in many rooms with business people, and I've said, hands up if you're doing the thing now that you thought or wanted to do, or thought you'd been doing when you were at school, and you get one hand go up. And it's just this crazy revelation, isn't it?
But it gives so much freedom. That's the thing. If you realise that, I said to my son Ben in the car today, because he was getting worked up that the bus was late, and I was like, yeah, but dude, you're not driving the bus. You're not going to get in trouble with the school. You're not going to be late. It's not your fault, but you just need to chill. Like, he's 11, just started secondary school. And it's amazing. I don't know how it happens, but people get into their heads all of these rules, all of this sort of structure, all of this stuff. And I mean, you said it earlier perfectly, which is, and Gary Vaynerchuk, who I love, regardless of what people think of him, I think he's awesome. But he said it's the should have, it's the what you should do, and it's just like, no, like, can we please just stop it?
Yeah, and within that there are a couple of different thoughts, which is in terms of ability to deal with people. And I'm not saying one needs to be, extrovert or gregarious or anything like that. But for me, particularly in business, and particularly if you're starting something, the ability to turn strangers into friends. I don't mean lifelong buddies, but the ability to build rapport quickly with people is unbelievably important. And I would say it's essential, actually, particularly if you're going to start something. It could be over the phone, it could be on the doorstep. And that's why working in hospitality, anyone, frankly, that says, well, we won't have waiters in a few years, so why should my child go and wait or be in service? Well, A, it's a very noble profession, and B, secretly they're gaining the ability to deal with people, and often that is not taught and cannot be learned at school.
Well, it goes back to the Disney experience. That's exactly what I was trying to articulate, and you did a much better job than I did, because it's set the foundation for my life and how to deal with people. So on a daily basis, I'll have conference calls or Zoom calls with people from all over the world. And we had Kim Andre, my old Norwegian roommate, on who's travelled to 100 countries, lived all over the world. And when he goes to, and he's got a meeting with someone from, I forget which country he used as a reference, he's been there, he's travelled there. So within a few seconds, he said, oh yeah, I've been, reference the culture, and they've built that connection really quickly. And
so I think what I hear a lot is people will say, well, of course I couldn't do anything outside. It might be insurance now because I've spent so long doing it, or I could never work outside, estate agency or whatever it happens to be. I think it's complete nonsense in so many occasions, because I'm so aware that the person I'm talking to is so engaging or employable. And I think that ability to zigzag, and I think because I haven't had what a lot of people would call a proper job, because I've often had that trust conferred on me by the jacket I'm wearing or the legendary theme park that I'm working for, I've realised that, with that comes a sort of lightness of, well, I do feel able to step into a new place or industry that I know nothing about. When I organised the first ever web mission, I did a whole series of them over time in 2008, jumping way ahead here. We took 20 brilliant companies to San Francisco. We took The Telegraph, we took Wired magazine, we took the global head of commercial banking at HSBC. I'm the chief red coat at the front of the bus. I'd never been to San Francisco. I didn't tell them that. I didn't feel the need to tell them that. And I had amazing colleagues and people on the ground in San Francisco. But I think there's a type of person that would never even consider doing that. Whereas I'm like, well, if I knew it really, really well, I probably wouldn't be doing this. You know, so there's that getting comfortable with the unknown and
Absolutely.
taking those calculated, you know, not being afraid to be a little bit cheeky, not quite to step over the doorstep without being invited. but it is that sense of, you know, it's going to be all right. Let's just go for it.
Yeah.
But I think we'll learn as we carry on talking through. But there's a general thread of consistency here throughout the experiences you've just talked about. There is this kind of connecting people, and we mentioned at the top of the show that you're a connector. Is that what gets you out of bed in the morning? Is it connecting people? Is it meeting people? And yeah, what is it that drives these?
When I was really young, like 7 or 8, I remember going into the garage at home, you know, and there was an adjoining door, and I was always looking, you know, I'd be looking for something to make a little plane with or something, you know, nuts and bolts or a piece of wood. And it gave me butterflies in my stomach. And I would always find sort of what I was looking for, because I'd use an elastic band instead or whatever it would have to be. But that sense of resourcefulness, that you'll probably find what you're looking for, and if not, you'll make do. That has been completely core to my way of thinking. And for me, that resourcefulness extends to people. And well, maybe you should meet this person. And what about this person? And let's go and give that person a try. Because I've never had to obey the constraints of, well, it's not your job to do that, or, you know, they're much more senior than you. I've never seen that. I've never felt the need to apologize for that, because either I'm not applying for a job, or why not? Why wouldn't they? And I think it is that intergenerational thing, because I got used to having conversations with people of different generations. So there was a breakthrough when I read a book by Malcolm Gladwell, which I highly recommend, called The Tipping Point, about how ideas spread. And in that, he describes a type of person called a connector, or the connector, which is a person who not only knows a lot of people, but enjoys and thrives off putting them in touch. And I certainly wasn't that when I read the book, but it really spoke to me, and I thought I would love to do that. That really called to me.
Incredible. And I guess going to parties, themed parties dressed as certain generations probably helped with the understanding.
Back to our Disney secrets, Peter. Let's hope those photos never emerge.
So, so Ben Way and the Rainmakers. Where did you move on from? You say it's still going today, but what was the next step for you after that?
One of the companies that we helped to start was called Friends Abroad, which was, again, back to the Disney, around that World Showcase Lagoon. Pen Pals Online, amazing entrepreneur, Simon Murdoch, founded that, sold it in 2008. And we were shareholders in that, less successfully. Socks by Box, socks on subscription, selling to over 20 countries. Started off as a joke, turned into a company. And as a sideline, I was being asked to, in fact, I read about a campaign encouraging entrepreneurship in schools. I thought, well, there wasn't a huge amount of that at my school, but I'd like to help the campaign. So I wrote to them offering help. And again, that became a habit, seeing someone doing something and saying, hey, how can I help? And I still do that. I write to the people. I wrote to the campaign, and it got me thinking about how to help, you know, schools think about starting stuff and making ideas come to life. And it was on one of those visits to a school. I volunteered to do some school visits. And this was a sideline from the business, that I was giving a talk. And I came away thinking, is my talk the best way? Or would it be better to give them something to do, a real challenge? And on the way back from school that day, or the school that day, I read about a vicar in Suffolk who needed to raise some money. And his technique was not to put out a bowl for donations, but to say, who wants £10 note? If you want a £10 note, I'll give you it. Make as much money as you can in a month, and the profits will go to the church. And made thousands of pounds. And it just like a light bulb moment. I thought, that's the idea, isn't it? That is the school's idea. So that night I got home and I called the vicar, spoke to his wife at first, got through to him, told him my mad idea. We should do this in thousands of schools. And I said, I've had this crazy idea. We should give 10,000 kids £10.
And you'd never met the vicar before?
Never met the vicar. A guy called Michael Eden in Suffolk. Got his number. Can't even remember how. Tracked him down at home. Said, that smells delicious. Can I come for dinner? You know, proverbially speaking. There it was. Exactly. And off we went. We broke bread. We didn't break bread. Never met him actually in the end, but he was very nice. And I said, do you mind if I borrow your idea? I've been inspired, and turn it into a schools challenge. And he said, well, I borrowed it off another vicar. It's been going on for hundreds of years. Don't worry. And he said, good luck to you. And so that became a simple idea called Tenor, Make Your Mark with a Tenner.
Make Your Mark with a Tenner. Remember that?
In conjunction with the campaign that I'd wrote to offer to help, and thanks to brilliant people, Scott Kane, Tom Savage, who gave it the green light and said, let's partner on this. We know loads of schools. You've had this idea. Let's do it together. But because I'd said, well, I said to friends, how much should we do it? Oh, by the way, here's the critical point. I wrote to some friends and said, can we talk about this idea? Come for breakfast. And one of them, Shah Wasmond, had said afterwards, I think I know someone who'll give you the money for this. Because I should have said, I asked for advice on how many kids to do it within the first year. Quite a few people came back and said 10. Quite a few people said one class. I said, it's not funny enough. It's going back to me. David Ogilvy said, the best ideas come as jokes, so make your thinking as funny as possible. And again, sounding a bit flippant, it wasn't entertaining. It didn't amuse me to do it with 10 kids. It did amuse me to do it with 10,000. Because why not? Just go for it. I mean, admittedly, there was a problem. I didn't have £100,000, but someone else did. And luckily, Shah introduced us to Andrew Reynolds, who wrote a check. He took a sip of his coffee. He said, I thought we were there for him to introduce us to wealthy people. He said, you don't know this, but I grew up living in a caravan. I think this is a brilliant idea. I'll give you the money myself.
Wow.
Wrote a check.
Incredible.
Unbelievable. And it sounds like there's a bit of a theme here, which is there's some central themes here around giving back, having great concepts, and then effectively pulling in the right people. It sounds like you sort of were building a bit of a recipe again. Who knows? Maybe learning from the first venture. It sounds like that was you learn a lot from that.
And I see it as very what's the word? Enlightened self-interest would be the technical phrase, but selfish would be blunter. You say giving back, I say enjoyment.
Yeah.
It didn't occur to me that this was doing good. It just occurred to me this would be a more fun way of doing what other schemes have not managed to do, which is to make something fun, make it interesting, make it enjoyable, think big, and realise that you don't have to have. It's a bit like that old fairy tale of stone soup, The traveller says he can make the most delicious soup with just a stone. If only he had a carrot, a villager has a carrot. If only he had some potatoes, a villager adds potatoes. All he had was an idea and a stone. And that's all I've had. So with several things over the years, because you don't need all the ingredients. Today, Tenner, now called the 10X Challenge, is in 5 countries. It's run by a young enterprise, an amazing charity. It is the UK's biggest schools entrepreneurship challenge to this day.
Incredible.
All from that idea, but also just daring to pick up the phone and say, why not? Let's just give it a go.
It's such a fantastic message, isn't it? People have ideas that don't end up going anywhere. They just keep it, and they're not sure what to do with it. Yeah. But you seem to have these ideas, and you just put yourself out there and say, come on, let's get heads banged together and let's get it moving. But
also, again, for slightly selfish reasons, I realise that I'm not capable, and I do not want to be involved in them forever. So without putting a team together, they're never going to happen. And that isn't in any sense false modesty. There are so many elements of doing that. I talk about the value of a gripper, someone to really get into the detail and grip it. That's not me. It's never been me. And so without that, without Luke or Martha at the start of Tenner, it would never have happened.
But I think a lot of people have insecurity about that. We've often talked quite a bit about sort of our character traits. And often a lot of the people can think, like, why do I struggle so much with detail? Or why can't I just focus on this? But people think it's a negative. It's like, no, you're just not understanding your skills or how you can apply your inherent characteristics in a positive way.
Yeah, and I think it is part of not taking yourself too seriously, knowing that there are some things which can always be developed and worked on. And if you're seeking a partner in business or a team member, you're not looking for a mini-me. You're not looking for a clone. Quite the opposite. You're often looking for the yin to your yang, aren't you? And just saying, if I'm honest. And again, it's back to that center of that ikigai 3 circles of, what are you good at? What will pay you money? What does the world need? And realizing that very often the thing that pays you might not be the thing you enjoy. And just being honest about that and realizing where a hobby could stay a hobby, for example.
I think we've mentioned Ikigai in every podcast we've done so far. I actually wrote to one of the authors asking if he'd come on. I haven't heard back. I need to follow up. I'll give him a call.
Follow up. There you go. Give him a call. Get his home number.
Say, hey, it's Pete.
What's cooking?
What's his mobile again?
Can I smell some food? Well, it's sushi. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you'd be on a roll.
But I think that Ikigai Venn diagram,
Oh.
if we're all honest, I mean that I think is the goal. It's the, I look at my business and there's components missing for sure, and I still look at that Venn diagram as, okay, it's doing most of it in some way, but it's not quite there. And obviously that's the magic of life, is I can't wait to keep exploring and get there. But I think for me that is one of the why there isn't a poster up in this room of it, I don't know, but it's it is a great summary of,
and I'm very drawn to the circle that is around what the world needs, and that's not a cue for a song, by the way, and
I nearly put the piano in here, by the way.
I talked him out of it.
Yeah, I'm more Bert from Sesame Street really than Bert Bacharach, sadly. Did you talk him out of it? How could you?
Yeah, anyway,
so
I want to hear the story.
What the world needs. No, it's not a story, don't worry, but it just strikes me that on the what the world needs is not going to be discovered by anyone just by sitting and pondering and mulling, or gazing at a diagram, etc. Whereas it is going to be discovered by getting out there and getting close to problems and so on and so forth, which is why half the things I've helped to start have often been triggered by reading about stuff.
Yeah.
And meeting people too, but often reading about problems actually, which is why I still read, print newspapers.
But I think there's an underlying theme in the stories that you've told so far and the ventures that you've embarked on, of helping people as well. Like back to the student days, back to the tenor days. It's about inspiring people.
I think that's what business is. I think, whether it could be goods and products, but it could be services. But that's the clue, isn't it? It's service. You are serving people. You are helping people. If you can have a successful business that was. I don't think you could have a successful business that was not fundamentally helpful. So I think it's all connected in that sense.
Yeah, very interesting. And so then post tenor, I mean, I'm conscious of the time because I'd like to touch on every single one that you've done. But if you've got such an array of experiences with all the ventures, which ones are you most proud of, or can you pluck out any highlights since the tenor days in terms of what you've been doing? Because it's an awful lot.
Well, again, with Tim Redding and Ed Selwood, we co-founded what is called VIY, so a bit like DIY, but with volunteering at the centre, so kids fixing their own youth clubs. And the reason I'm proud to have helped start it is that it helps kids get a qualification, get real skills, they get a mentor, and thousands of kids have been through that. It's a successful, profitable social enterprise today.
Wow.
And I just love the fact that, seen from the wrong angle, that could just be a scheme. That could be just a one-year thing. But 10, 11 years later, that thrives across the UK. I'm really proud to have helped start TOTS, the Turn on the Subtitles campaign, with Henry Warren. Did you know kids are twice as likely to become good readers if you turn on subtitles? And so
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so I mean, it just to me, that was just profound. It was like a bolt of lightning. I saw Bridge Kataria, amazing thinker and academic based in the US and in India, showing the research time and again that's proven that. And I thought, that can be more than research, that can be more than a TED talk. This should be a campaign. And so with the help of an amazing team, we've worked with Stephen Fry and Lenny Henry and Jack Black in the US to take that message to millions of parents and to try and persuade broadcasters to stick on subtitles by default. But again, that isn't a business. It is ongoing, and it is simple. I think
it's a great idea.
That's a common theme.
Yeah,
simplicity, potential scalability, knowing that I am not the one to be involved for particularly long in some cases.
So you kind of incubate the idea, you bring people together, you get things moving with your passion and your drive, and then you exit at I guess a point where it makes sense to you to step back a little bit and allow it to carry on its way.
And really, fortunately, a couple of things have happened alongside what I've loved doing. One is that it turns out that if you keep going on the presenting and interviewing front, people will pay you very well to do that and be trusted to do that around the world, which becomes, a really, for me, fulfilling way to make money, and in a way that gives me real freedom, because a job well done and decently rewarded releases you, yes, to carry on working with them, but then to cross-pollinate across lots of other things. So that's the first thing that happens. The second thing that happens is if you're able to prove yourself valuable and useful to entrepreneurs, you end up earning shares in their company, often without investing cash money. And so that becomes the second byproduct. So what has happened is I have that string as the presenter MC, and I've accumulated shares in several companies. We've invested in a few as well, but that becomes the byproduct. So, of course, important to say, point 3 is obviously still making it up as I go along. But actually, what starts off as an experiment turns into thinking, crikey, this could actually be a thing.
It's really interesting, but you've engineered almost a lifestyle and a career choice that allows you to dip in and out of all these amazing ideas and projects, but you've still got the stability of the other stuff along the side.
Yeah, you've still got to deliver and meet and exceed, back to Disney, the expectations of the clients and the partners you're working with. For me, I decided a very long time ago that for me, the highest value for me was freedom. So freedom to move, to say what I feel, to take risks with ideas. I'm not saying I honour all of these, but to be unconstrained. And so whilst I admire the entrepreneur who goes into the office and builds the company day after day, year after year, I know that can't be me.
And that goes back to your university days. You knew that couldn't be used to deploy yourself for the 4 years, because you almost need to keep moving and do, or keep the variety up, I guess.
100%.
But I think what I find fascinating about that is having the conviction to know that and act on it. Well, first of all, to actually understand that about yourself, because a lot of people don't. I mean, I'll hold my hands up. I've stayed in jobs too long because I thought I should. I thought it was the safe thing to do. But I think what I find so impressive is how you've understood that about yourself, but then you've worked out how to navigate value in the different scenarios that you're in. As in, okay, I'm not saying this is this. I'm sort of not saying this is you, but it's like, I'm not a detail guy. I'm not saying I'm not a detail guy. I don't know, but you know what I mean. As in, from this conversation, but to sort of actually, okay, this isn't me, but this is me, and this is where I can add value, and I'm going to translate that.
Yeah. And going back to something we've touched on before, it's having that sense of, this is me at my best. This is me feeling my best, performing my best. Am I capable of other things? And you incorporate that into the mix. But very often that gets misunderstood. So as in, if I'm presenting, detail becomes unbelievably important to me. Yeah. And that might be around pronunciation. It might be around timing. It might be around getting exactly what you think is needed from a particular interview or conversation or event. Likewise, I tend to present, more generally in business, as fairly upbeat and positive, dare I say, enthusiastic, I hope. The truth is, I'm actually very grumpy. A lot of the time I'm very moody, I get very passionate, I get very emotional, as my amazing wife knows, and dear friends know, and my inner circle know. So I think it's recognizing that, in my opinion, you tell me, I don't think that's inauthentic. I just think that's the fact that we all contain very different parts, and just being cool with that and comfortable with that.
Absolutely. No, but I think on the authenticity piece, and by the way, I think also what you said about freedom is, I think it's everything. As in, whatever that freedom is to you, I think people finding that. I'm not there yet entirely. We've even talked about the podcast. I love talking about the more conspiratorial elements of politics. I just don't do it on here because everyone would think I was nuts. But eventually one day I want to do it, because that would be me being authentic in what I'm passionate about. Yeah. It's a bad example. And by the way, I'm not a lunatic. But
it's a great example, because you're creating a vehicle, just like a company could be a vehicle, which gives you permission to explore and to roam.
Exactly.
And if you look at the timeline of this podcast, you can see that, right? You're going so much broader than you would have probably thought when you started, right?
Absolutely.
And that's what's exciting.
It's connections,
Absolutely.
it's meeting people, it's networking as well, albeit on a smaller scale. But people are leading to other people, and it's fascinating making the connections and hearing people's stories. I mean, it's genuine curiosity. It's not a staged. Let's do a podcast. We love it.
Yeah, and distilling back, I know we've talked about passing stuff on to kids before, but I think taking a chance and saying hi to someone, whether that's on email, in the street, on the doorstep, in the corridor. And then I think the secret no one ever tells you, and I've literally done courses on building networks, and the main theme is it's actually about keeping in touch. That's the secret no one tells you.
Yeah.
So most people will focus all their time thinking about networks and networking and meeting people and dealing with people, on meeting new people. Well, that's where people go wrong, because they don't invest the time in keeping in touch, and that becomes the secret. So I suppose that's been a joy for me, is being able to keep in touch with a lot of people over a lot of years, and being much more interested, and I know anyone would say this, but much more interested in the person than the role they had, because everyone's zigzagging more than ever.
Of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've said this before as well. It really frustrates me when you see people meeting on TV and the first question they ask is, "What do you do?" It's almost, it happens so frequently.
Yeah, it's the worst question, really.
It really is.
Yeah, well, especially for people that don't enjoy what they do.
Exactly. Do you enjoy what you do?
I love it. I absolutely love it. I'm not there yet at all. But then I think it is, well, I hope it's a it's a journey that I've got some time to work on, right? I was never going to be the romantic lead. Those days they never arrived, if I'm honest. So I can't say those days have passed. I'm more of the character actor who's been honing. I sound like Liam Neeson, a very particular set of skills. So
you are so good, Ollie. I've seen you at many events, and you are a natural on the stage. You hold the whole room in your hand. You are a master at MCing, in my eyes. Anyway, I think absolutely fantastic.
That's really kind. I love it.
Do you enjoy when you're on stage and you've been on stage with some big hitters in the business world? Are you nervous before you go on stage, or are you just so used to that kind of habitat now that you
I don't get nervous per se. I would say, I don't want to split hairs, I probably feel anxious to do a great job. I have hosted, in some very big places around the world. I've hosted on stage at the Royal Albert Hall. I've presented around the cabinet table at number 10. Very privileged to have done those things. I think I'm very lucky because I've talked about this recently about chairing and presenting. It's a bit like the fact that at Butlins, they weren't there to see me. They were there to see a red coat, and just getting over yourself and realising that. In other words, if I was the star speaker or star guest, maybe I'd be nervous. But I'm the presenter. I'm the chair. They're not there to see. They're not there to see me, and that takes the edge off. Realising that my real job is to make other people feel comfortable. That takes another edge off. So that helps as well. And then, very bizarre, but at Butlins, I think I got a badge misspelt. And so my name came back as Ollie, L-L-Y. And this is ridiculous, by the way. But I chose not to change it. And it suddenly occurred to me that I could be Ollie. Which is totally ridiculous as a thought. But I could become a different person. A slightly different person. Does that make any sense?
It does, completely.
Yeah.
I had a friend who went to university and just told everyone he was called Joan and told everyone he was called Jack.
Yeah. Joan?
Joe.
Oh, Joe. Sorry. Yes. Yeah.
I hope he doesn't mind me telling me
back to our old people's party. Yes.
I hope he doesn't mind me. But I thought it was a bit weird at the time, and I was like, no, I get it. Like,
yeah. Well, I think it's about, and it comes back, and we'd unpick this if we had more time. But I think it's about that authenticity challenge. But for me, it's about persona.
Yeah.
We have moderate. We moderate our personas depending on who we're around. You are not the same person. When the kids have gone to bed and they're asleep, you will moderate your behaviour at a dinner party in most cases. For example, silly example. And for me, it's that ability to develop a persona which is related but not the same when you're on stage, for example. So you don't become. It's not. Beyonce, Sasha Fierce, there are lots of sort of alter ego examples of this. So it's not the full Barry Humphries becomes Dame Edna, I think. But it is saying I need to change and embody a slightly different set of things. And again, maybe it's because I was acting or something. It's not pretending, but it is a form of
It's amplifying your traits to a point, isn't it? When you get on stage, like you say, some days you know everyone gets out of bed and they don't feel necessarily happy or on song all the time. But if you're getting paid to be on stage, people are coming to see you, and you're right, people are there to see other people. But it's the fundamental role in the whole event, because without you there, making sure everything ticks along well and presents everything. It's not,
and it's about the blend of experiences. So I think, I'm so happy when I'm on my own in my garden office, just me thinking, and yet that would be awful the whole time. So and likewise, I'm so happy when I'm surrounded by people, working with people. But again, the idea for me of being a full-time presenter, I would hate, and I couldn't do it. I wouldn't have the energy.
But because just on the point of networking, and it ties into what you're saying, I probably don't do it as much as I should. I used to do it a lot more. I'm getting back into the swing of it, but I am one of those people, whether I like to admit it or not, when I leave a networking event, I'm like, take the tie off, whatever it is that, I do love it. I enjoy it, but I'm so relieved when it's finished. And I've been like that ever since my 20s. And I've always beaten myself up a little bit for it, because it's like, what's wrong with me? I'm not a good businessman because I don't thrive on this networking. But I think actually what you said earlier about, those different environments is, I think eventually you learn that's okay. It's there is no way that you should be. Obviously, I guess you've got to learn as you grow up some fundamental basics of how to, let's say, add value in a situation.
Totally.
But it's a case of also, I don't think enough people allow themselves to be themselves if they just accept it and be like, no, it's okay to get out of the networking environment and be like, oh, I'm really glad that's finished.
Yeah, and enjoying the change, right? And enjoying the change. It's a bit like saying, this is really funny thing. I get really hungry. And then I eat something, and then I don't feel hungry, and it's really weird, that change. I don't know what's going on. I'm saying, well, that would be a ridiculous thing to say, right? And so for me, when you change certain things in your life, it's completely normal to go through that series of emotions. I mean, I've got a very strange relationship with running. I've run for however many, I've been running all my life. I think I don't actually particularly enjoy it. And yet I have to do it, mainly for my mental health, every week, if I can. And yet nothing really will ever beat the feeling of finishing a run for me, because it's finished.
But that's the point, that you don't always feel like going for a run, but when you come back, there's very few times you come back and think, oh, I kind of regret doing that.
Totally. And although I'm often, I'm giving, masterclasses on building networks. I'm speaking from stage on these, big platforms. I went into an event not so long ago, and I bumped into a very good friend of mine, Michael, outside the event. And I said, I'm just not feeling this today. And I just wanted to go home. I did not. And then you take a deep breath and you go in, and then you meet another person, you have a laugh. But I think it's complete. Yeah. And I think it's really sinister and not helpful, actually, to go around pretending that everyone goes flying into those environments.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I think it does breed imposter syndrome sometimes, because I think people think, that person's got it all figured out. They're just like a robot. They just do everything. They're perfect. They're da-da-da-da-da-da. And actually, I felt like that definitely in my 20s, when you're getting into, let's say, a corporate world in particular, like, actually, but then you just learn, no, they're trying really hard. They're probably quite disciplined. They're really prepared. They're doing all of the things right, but also I suppose it's like, they're not playing a game, because that sounds like it's really inauthentic. It's not, but you can have a strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're doing a thing in a way for a time.
Yeah.
It couldn't always be like that. They would burn out if it was always like that. It's like a burst of something, isn't it? For me, and it's just seeing it as that burst, and just seeing it for what it is, and not freaking yourself out that you have to commit to that as a way of behaving all the time. You put on a different persona to cold call that person. Less cold calling now, but you know what I mean. Just you steel yourself.
Yeah.
I'm conscious of time, and I could talk all day, Oli, you know that. But there's a couple of areas I just want to quickly ask you about. Well, you're too modest to bring the first one up, so I'm going to bring it up anyway. But you were on the Queen's Honours List a few years ago, weren't you? How did that come about, and how was that experience?
Oh, well, it came about, this is 2013, letter through the post. Almost didn't get to us, actually, and a surprise. And from a senior official in government, because it's a double act between government and the royals, if you like, and your name has been put forward, and you can be nominated for these things. You obviously can't put yourself forward. Obviously, I would have done. No, you can be nominated, or you can have your name put forward through certain departments, government departments for health or culture. And I think because I'd been involved in a campaign with Number 10 called Startup Britain, I'd introduced the founders to each other, so I became a co-founder. And I think partly through that, maybe through 10 or a little bit, my name had been put onto the list. And and so I got the letter saying, would you be? And a lot of very, very good people have declined honours for lots of good reasons, or some good reasons, and so you're asked, would you accept one?
Yeah, because Stephen Fry turned his down. Am I right?
Lots of people, yes. I think Roald Dahl. Sometimes it's because they wanted a bigger one.
So you didn't have to
the big friendly honour.
Call Buckingham Palace and ask for the Queen's mobile number there. But that must have been an incredibly proud moment for you and your family. And
well, it was amazing. And
Mr. Bryden.
That's right. Yes, right. I think it's Mr. Brightside then. No, I stood next to Rob Brydon. I don't know whether that was Back to the Bees as well. It was an barrister was next to him. But yes, Rob Brydon, Windsor Castle. Got to bring 3 guests. I actually smuggled in 4 because Verity, my wife, was pregnant with our first daughter at the time, and Mum and Dad came.
Oh, amazing! Absolutely incredible. Yeah,
that is actually special as a memory, because you think to yourself at the time, because I think living up to their expectation. I wouldn't call it a pressure, because they have never pressured me. But I think living up to their expectation is a joyful thing. Yeah. And I think having had weird career twists and turns, there is a bit of you, and again, it might be just being overly flippant, but there's a bit of you that says you might not have achieved any recognisable career things. However, this is a thing.
Well,
I mean, in terms of title or, all those other things. The only downside, I must say, was it got written up in the local news, on BBC Berkshire, whatever it was, and the headline was "Double Dropout," which I thought was wonderful, by the way. I think that's not just one badge of honour, but 2, as far as I'm concerned. Double dropout receives honour or something. I just remember my mum being absolutely horrified at being, because for her, I don't think she'd read all the Silicon Valley nonsense, so she thought dropout, that's just an insult. But it also occurred to me that until that time, she might have been accidentally hinting to her friends that I'd got 2 degrees. Because technically I had been to Edinburgh and Leeds, hadn't I?
That's true.
So anyway, a very exciting day, and I got to meet the late, great Her Majesty the Queen.
Absolutely. But that must have been so nerve-wracking.
It really was, yeah. Particularly because they only brief you on the day, and they tell you what's involved in terms of bowing and curtsying and turn this way, turn that way, don't do this, do that. It was absolutely terrifying. You're meeting arguably the most famous person in the world.
Well, what did she say to you?
Do you know what she said to me, Pete? Are you digging? I don't think you're allowed to say, are you? This is terrible. I'll be off with his head. Well, the monarch, whoever they are at the time, has somebody behind them, a little bit like someone in their ear on breakfast TV, whispering facts. And they'd say, this is, John Smith, surgeon from Beaconsfield or whatever. And they say, which hospital, And so for me, he's muttering something, her equerry or whatever, about the tenor scheme. And I can hear it. And she clearly didn't understand a word of it. And she said, and why should she? And she said, what is this? And I won't do an impression, that would be very disrespectful. But she was like, what is this? And I said, well, Your Majesty, I'm going to tell a story. So she says, I said, Your Majesty, we are giving 10,000 children £10 at a time, and they have a month to turn it into something amazing. And she says, and again, I will not do the impression, but She says, only £10. She's horrified. A small denomination. And I said, yes, Your Majesty. And they've done. And I thought, well, I've got limited time. And by the way, in the briefing chamber, literally surrounded by suits of armour, you're told, Her Majesty will signal that the conversation is over by extending her hand. So it's a bit like being buzzed out in a game show. And so then you'll know the conversation's over. Get out. So I'm like, crikey, we've got to pack it in here. So I said, yes, and they've done this, and they've done recipe books and fashion shows. And she was very intrigued at this point. And she looks at me and she says, do you think all children are capable of this? I thought, wow, what a that's a bit of shade there, isn't it, from the Queen? She's doubting, maybe a little bit cynical. And so I said yes, and then I used a word I haven't used before or since. I said yes, and furthermore. I mean, Mr. Parkinson, the English teacher, would have been absolutely delighted. He'd have winked at that point, knowingly. Furthermore, I like what you're doing there, Oliver.
Brilliant.
And I said, furthermore, I think all young people should be given the chance to start something. She just looked at me and put her hand out. And I turned, bowed, curtsied, wandered off, my head swimming, and the next minute or so was a blur. All I remember was someone removing it's not a badge, but the honour from my chest, and I thought I'd been stripped of it for some reason. It turns out it was only Velcroed on, so I would be given it in a box, but I thought I might have messed the whole thing up.
No, but seriously, I mean, it was a while ago now, but congratulations, and a dear friend father of my best friends has recently had a similar experience, and I'm going to be completely honest with you. I'm not a royalist, but that experience and that sort of accolade, there's just no doubting it. And like you said, it's what it represents. And so really, well done. I mean,
amazing.
It's an extraordinary thing. It is people from, again, all professions, all walks of life. In fact, one of my not so secret ambitions is to help those people who have received an honour at some point actually better connect with each other. Because frankly, I think if some of the cancer nurses and doctors and ex-soldiers and entrepreneurs spent more time hanging out, would probably, they would probably, A, get on, and B, cook up more schemes together. So I'm quite serious about that, because it is this remarkable day in your life, and then you never see each other again. So I think we've got an opportunity sitting under our noses in this country, whether or not you like the honour system, to join the dots.
Yeah. A friend of mine just been honoured, actually. He's in the military a couple of weeks ago, so that was really nice. And then the other question, which is a bit of a loaded question for you given the time we've got, but you did an incredible trip with your lovely family last year, didn't you?
Yeah, I did.
So having the freedom to be able to...
I was just going to say, when you were talking when you were saying about the freedom piece, because you told me about that story.
Yeah, we took, so 4 of us, 2 girls, and Verity and I took off for what turned out to be a school term. So we took our eldest out of school, and we went on an extraordinary trip. And the moment we booked the tickets was elating, you can imagine. So Singapore, Vietnam, spent a whole month in Australia, a month in New Zealand, almost a month in Japan. And it was just the trip of a lifetime. But the reason it happened was 2 things. Firstly, because we're very lucky to be able to do that, given, just that sort of hopeful freedom there. The 2 real things were quite a few colleagues a little bit older, so they've got older children, and I was following their lives and thinking, crikey, we get into some pretty serious exam territory pretty soon. And our girls were, 8 or 9 and 2 or something. So I thought, okay, we've got a window. And then the second thing was just back to that, imagine yourself as an 8-year-old. Imagine yourself as an 8-year-old, and that 8-year-old is heckling you. What are they saying? And for me, one of the things they were heckling, apart from look after your back and invest more or all that sort of stuff, was one of the things they were heckling was travel more, go and see the world. So but how lucky to even be able to consider doing that, right? But it was definitely that flip of that reframing. Yeah. So we did a big trip last year.
It looked incredible. It sounded amazing, and it was something I'm sure the girls will remember fondly, even though Flo was young, right? But what an amazing experience for you all to I mean, there's a documentary I saw a couple of years ago where families took their kids out of school and travelled, and they just got so much out of it. I think
it was
wonderful.
It was an amazing thing, and most of all, I'd say in terms of kids, just back to that ability to throw them into, whether you're at a like a hostel, but a sort of a shared kitchen environment, and to see them chatting with couples and individuals from all around the world, and just enjoying that and building up little
life-changing,
just little pen pals. You think that is sort of unbelievable to see that in action.
Amazing, especially the world seems to be in a precarious position at times, so to be able to enjoy it that way is
we're fortunate, aren't we? I mean, Pete, you've travelled so much as well, and it is of course it's eye-opening, but it's very lucky to be able to do it.
And it reminds me of Jacqueline's now famous quote,
which we never do it justice every time we mention it, but
we say famous quote that we can't even quote.
No, but it's very profound.
Well, come on then.
What is it? Travel is the enemy of bigotry,
and narrow-mindedness, I think, something like that. And it's just so profound, isn't it? Travel, it's just so impactful.
Yeah, well, especially if you get out of the car or minibus and meet people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Oli, we always finish our podcast on the same question. Again, I could talk all day. Thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Not at all. I've loved it. Thank you.
It's been incredible. If you could go back to young Oli B in the school days before you embarked on all your adventures, and all those lessons you've learned along the way, all the experiences you've all the knowledge you've amassed, and the amazing, incredible things that you've done, and give yourself one little bit of advice looking back. You talked about the nagging older you, but if you could go back to your younger you and give yourself some advice, what do you think that might be?
I might add two really quick ones.
Sure.
I'd say spend more time with your grandparents, because no one's around forever. I'd say you will have days when you don't feel great. You'll have hours that you don't feel great, and that's fine. This might have been a lot for a little boy. And life is a very big adventure, so go for it. And there'll be trips along the way, but just get back up and crack on. That's what I'd say.
Amazing.
And the little boy would have looked at me and said, "And you are."
Wonderful.
I mean, I wonder what I would have made of that second point. That's quite heavy, isn't it?
But I think with that second point, just before we wrap up, I think it's a huge point. But what do you just add some context to it, if you can?
I had some really, I had years and months where I flew along through, particularly in secondary school, but I had times when I was really not enjoying life. I would, I was struggling. I had very bad, it might sound ridiculous, but I had, very bad acne, really affected my self-esteem. I had an operation on my chest which was appearance related actually, and that knocked me again, and I could list a few other different aspects, and it made me very unhappy actually, and so it's just the idea that will pass, and there's so much about this, and I find this a lot with men as well. We haven't got time now, but just that ability to say, despite the laughs and the camaraderie, it's all right to be going through something a bit challenging, to say the least, and you can talk about it, and that doesn't then define you or define every further conversation you have to have. And I think just that ability to embrace that and realize that by opening that door doesn't make you a different person. Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And well said. And I think, again, all I can hope for is a huge amount of people who listen to this, because I think those types of messages are really important. Again, I think there's no question, if someone had said that to me at 18, what you've said, it changes everything. So no, well said. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's something I say to my eldest a lot, which is, I can't remember who said it. I think something like Buckminster Fuller, which was like 99% of who we are is unseeable and unknowable. So in terms of, who you are. That's an internal thing, really. And yeah, how we present is relevant, but it isn't it. You know, so I think we get so fixated, don't we, on who we present being who we are, and it's just not. It's just, you know, it is very different.
Even more so in the social media world that we live in now,
Totally.
because that 1% is what's pushed out on the socials, and you know, it's
Totally.
quite a dangerous place. But yeah,
Totally. Well, there we go.
Ollie, thank you so much.
No, I've loved it.
I
Absolutely. Well,
loved the
gosh.
conversation.
Well,
So-
thank you for walking me down memory lane.
Well, it was a delight, and I'm sorry if we skipped over some, but it felt like we could have delved into a lot more. But I was just conscious of time, and we probably missed
I think
half
we
of
could do
it.
another 6.
I know. We'll bring the piano next time.
No, well, I will continue. I want to tune into your next guest. I commend the listener to everyone you've interviewed. I think it's time for a podcast party soon, please.
Great idea.
Ollie, thank you very much.
Thanks, Pete. Thanks, Adam.
Thanks so much. Absolutely amazing.
Let's never ever go to sleep again. Wait, I think I'm starting to fade again. I don't want the end. Call up your friend, but I